Hey everyone, this is the Think Truth podcast. I'm here with Katie Heffner, and we're looking forward to talking about science and Anabaptists and how all that relates today. So welcome to the Think Truth podcast. All right, well, since you can't see it, I'll let you know what I have in the background. Our house is actually a real mess right now. We are headed off to Germany in just a couple weeks to serve there with I-58. And so we're packing up our house and getting everything ready to go. So the background's a complete mess. Everything downstairs is a complete mess. But what you see here is our perfect life. So anyway, Katie, thanks for coming on.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to have you. Just a little bit of background first for our listeners and watchers. So you started going to our church probably like 3 or so years ago. And so we got to know you better, and it's been great to know you and your husband Sam's life a little more. And anyway, at some point we thought, because of what we're going to get into with your background and stuff, it'd be great to talk about science with you here on the podcast. So maybe before we get into our subject matter, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Some things that would be interesting to listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not going to kind of give my whole testimony or anything like that, but I think I'll kind of focus on a little bit of my educational journey, because I think it kind of merges with my spiritual journey, which I think makes sense, because I think as we're in our young adult years, we're discovering ourselves, we're discovering the world, our purpose. So your education journey kind of goes together with your spiritual journey. So I actually graduated high school a year early. So I skipped my junior year. And at the time I was raised in a Christian home, non-Anabaptist. So my mom was a Presbyterian.
In case everyone can't see that in your name, Heffner. Well, it's your husband's
Well, no,
name,
that's my husband.
Yeah.
Yes, my maiden name would be Sullivan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good Irish name, but yeah. So I was raised in a Christian home, but non-Anabaptist, and I would have, went through my typical teenage struggles, but eventually thought, I'm a Christian. And so I was contemplating, where am I going to go to school? And I settled on this very small liberal arts college called St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland. So I'm from Maryland. And this school is a great books program. So essentially over 4 years, everyone goes through the exact same course of study. So your freshman year is your Greek.
So this is Great Books of the Western World?
Yes,
right?
of the Western world. Yeah,
In case people aren't familiar with that.
Yeah, so that would have been in 2006-07 timeframe. They may have expanded a little bit beyond the Western canon, but at the time it was the Western canon. So your freshman year, classics, was Greek. We called your Greek year. So you actually learned ancient Greek. So I got to practice translating portions of the New Testament, which was very cool. You studied Plato, Aristotle, your math, your science were all, your ancient Greek mathematicians and philosophers and things like that. Anyway, that year was a really rough year for me personally, being 17, away from home, in a very liberal college environment. And so I kind of went through kind of a spiritual crisis, I would say, a personal crisis. And I also realized, what in the world am I going to do with a liberal arts degree? This is not the most practical.
Yeah.
So that summer, I actually left St. John's, thought that I was going to transfer to George Washington University for political science. Ended up not going. And around that time, I also discovered Charity. So that summer, I was visiting a whole bunch of churches, visited Charity, went to Bible school that fall.
Okay.
Charity Youth Bible School,
Yep.
where I actually became a Christian, realized, I've never had that born-again experience, became a Christian, went back home, thought maybe I'll go become a teacher. So I went to community college, I went to a state school, was studying special education, but the following fall then I went back to Charity Youth Bible School, heard a sermon about leaving Egypt, and kind of got on fire for God and said, I'm leaving everything. I'm going to become a charityite. I don't know. So anyway, so a family from Charity took me I moved in with them, lived there for about a year and a half. And then around that time, I also taught 5th grade for a year at a Mennonite school, which was a cool experience. So I got to experience Faith Builders a little bit for the summer term. Anyway, then different things happened, and I was kind of like, I don't know if this conservative Anabaptist life's for me. So I sort of left. And in leaving, I also decided to go back to school, and this is part of why I'm here, to study nuclear engineering.
Fascinating.
So right. So, I've got, philosophy, the great books, education, political science, but no, I'm going to be a nuclear. Then you jump to, right. And it's because science. I've always been super interested in physics, quantum mechanics, reading about astrophysics, the nature of time. And I thought, why don't I just go to school for that?
Yeah.
So I kind of started a little bit kind of elementary, and that was very helpful. So I kind of took a community college course, spent a year at a state school, kind of getting my Calc 1, Calc 2, Chem 1, Chem 2, sort of your basic classes. Yeah. Transferred to University of Tennessee, where I then crammed almost 4 years of engineering school, other than some of the prereqs that I gotten out of the way. So 4 years of nuclear engineering into like 2 years.
Oh my, that's crazy. That sounds like an intense 2 years.
It was pretty intense, but I will say that my experience in an odd way at a Mennonite school teaching 5th graders and at Faith Builders, like the Anabaptist approach to education, I don't know. It was very inspiring. There's kind of a diligence, sort of an integrity, I don't know, that you don't...
It kind of set you up in some ways.
That really set me up. So the way that I approached education was totally different than when I first... Yes. So I think I was able to get through it because of that. And then, let's see, so I graduated, got a job fresh out of college down in Georgia at a commercial nuclear facility as a reactor engineer. And then I was able to get a job. I want to be close to my family. So I got the job that I have now out of DC, which I now work remotely, still in the nuclear industry. Now, I will say I've left a lot of the practical engineering work behind because I'm more in an oversight role.
Okay.
So it's been about 8 years since I've done sort of the hands-on research and practical stuff. So that's kind of my journey.
That's fascinating. I'm sure you still interact with a lot of people who are doing the practical stuff. Yeah. Great. That's one of the things that I think is overlooked often, and people forget about like the practical side of science, thinking more about the theoretical side. And I think people sometimes, not always, but sometimes people imagine when they think of science like the ivory towers of people who are just like thinking like almost like thinking too much about stuff and come up with arcane ideas about life that's not helpful. But science and how it actually impacts our day-to-day life in a lot of ways that people don't think about. That's something that's fascinating.
Yeah, so engineering, like when I was considering going back, the reason I picked engineering was because I wasn't sure I wanted to spend all my time in academia just thinking grand thoughts. And to be honest, it was a little intimidating. So I thought engineering is just a much more practical, hands-on, you can apply so you can still learn all that great stuff. I still took nuclear physics and learned about quantum mechanics and all that. But then like my day-to-day job was very practical, hands-on.
Yeah, I love it. Well, since we're talking about science, let's go big picture for a minute. And so we got a little bit into this already, but what do we mean when we say science? And I think it's helpful maybe to think about how did we get to the place where we are today and with what we think of science today versus what people might have thought of science like 500 years ago, maybe, or something. Yeah. Like science has changed so much, the definition in some ways. And so many more people are doing science than we're doing it in the 1600s or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe let's talk about some of that evolution of science and like what we mean when we talk about it.
So it's kind of interesting. This is where, like St. John's experience, that Greek year kind of comes into play.
Yeah.
Because science, in a way, is just trying to discover truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so way back when, philosophy, science, religion, metaphysics, like all these things were very intertwined because they were all, what was their ultimate goal? To get at whatever truth is. What is truth? Now I think, as you've had the scientific revolution, as we kind of have become more empirical, like we're sort of creating this secular sacred divide in a lot of ways. And I think we've sort of separated out science from philosophy or from religion. And so when I think now when we talk about science, what we're talking about again is studying truth, but it's truth that can be observed. It's truth about kind of our natural world, what you can experience through your senses, what you can do an experiment on. It's kind of, the facts about our natural world, but it's not really trying to contemplate the why or if that, But both things, like, we're in both studies, we're approaching what is truth. It's just a different.
Yeah, I love what Nancy Percy says about that in her book Total Truth. Have you read Total Truth?
It's on my to
it's
read.
Yes, you're infamous to read.
Yes.
Yeah. So she also borrowed a lot of that from Chuck Colson, or was influenced by him, and also Francis Schaeffer. And Francis Schaeffer, which I have read a lot of, and I'm a big fan of his. He says truth is something that across the board, whether it's the truth of the natural world or whether it's the truth within Scripture, is something that is actually absolute, as opposed to what modern thought tends to want to tell us. And therefore, whether it's the natural, world truth or whether it's scriptural truth, whatever is actually true, if we care enough about it and we dig deep enough, we're going to find out what's actually true. And so he talks about like the difference, the divide today between philosophy and science. Lawrence Krauss, are you familiar with him somewhat?
Yeah.
So I watched this debate between him and William Lane Craig.
Okay.
In, I think it might've been in like 2009 or something. It was a little back. But in this debate, he's typically, very, kind of irate and, upset the entire time and goes on these rants and stuff. He's a very interesting guy, but, William Lane Craig, who was the Christian debating, was giving his points and asking questions. And at one point, Lawrence Krauss says, "I hate philosophy." He's like, science is just so much. Science is, definite. And I forget exactly what he said, but philosophy, I don't like philosophy. And William Lane Craig's like, you can't like not like philosophy, and that's your argument against what I'm saying. But what it did bring out is the fact that a lot of modern day scientists do see philosophy as a completely separate discipline, and like one shouldn't expect to be able to find real truth within philosophy, whereas within science it's more objective and stuff. And
I think that's, like as our society, as our culture, has accepted more that, kind of issues of morality or issues of religion are subjective and relative, then it doesn't make sense the divide then suddenly makes sense, because we're after absolute truth, but that whole area is relative. Mm-hmm. So then you can't actually,
But early scientists actually many times were philosophers too.
Right, because they did feel like, these things could be absolute, right?
Yeah. Of course, Isaac Newton's the classic, who he wrote theology books, wrote commentaries and stuff, while he also gave
us classical physics.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. So now the scientific method itself was considered like invented or put into form or something like that by Francis Bacon, right?
Okay, yeah.
And he just laid out, I think, what has been practiced for a while, but basically asking questions, the inductive method, right? Asking questions to try to figure out what is true and continually questioning yourself so you figure out where you're wrong and trying to get more closer to the truth. And in a sense, I think that's like the most basic form of what science is. Is that fair? In a sense, like ultimately it's just questioning and whatever field that is, you're trying to figure out if our assumptions are true. And if they're not true, we want to get at something that's somehow more true. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's, the scientific method, posing questions, doing research, developing a hypothesis, coming up with experiments to test, gather data, put that data, put those conclusions out there, and then have it peer reviewed and challenged and tested. And is it repeatable, right? Mm-hmm. So if I do it, will you get the same results? Will the third person, fourth person, whatever, get the same results? Does it actually, hold up? And then I think as we learn more, then, hypotheses, theories are constantly being tested and challenged and refined. I think the more complex systems you get, the harder it is to, draw definitive conclusions. So I would say that's fair.
If there's one thing I could change about the way that, this sounds awful, but common people or people who let's say people who they don't have a degree in whatever, but they want to know what's true. And the one thing I wish we could change overall is when you see someone quoting like a study or saying like experts say or whatever, I wish everyone had like a way to sift through it, I mean, there are ways, right? Yeah. But it's just that for a lot of people, they just either tune out when somebody says an expert said, because they're just like, whatever seems true to me, I'm going to believe them. Otherwise, right. I don't know where to go from there. Or they basically cherry pick whoever they want to listen to and then just assume that their studies and their facts and whatever are true. And I wish people would actually sort through the evidence in some way.
Yes. And I think I was just I just gave a training at work on resolving differing professional opinions or differing technical positions. And one of the things I said is, when we're talking about just simple facts, it's a lot easier to do that sifting. Like what I think we get confused about is we as anyone, we make conclusions or judgments based on those facts. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when we say experts say, we're then talking about what their opinion is on the set of facts that are out there. Yeah. Or what should we go and do about these facts, or what's the correct, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so that actually, experts can say many different things. So I think you have to decide, okay, are we actually talking about verifiable facts or just, raw data? Or are we saying, what are you extrapolate from that data? Or what judgment call are you making on that data? Or what action are you saying we should take based on that data? Yeah. I think one of the famous or frequently said statements is correlation does not imply causation, right? Yeah. So we can both look at something and say, okay, yes, these two variables are correlated. Mm-hmm. But to explain to you why they're is one causing the other, there could be confounding, that stuff gets into more speculation. And so, and I think maybe that's some of the misunderstanding is we're actually debating what we're doing with the facts versus the truth of the facts. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
If that helps.
Which then this word scientism kind of comes in, right? Because the difference between science and scientism, if you want to use that word, is science is just this process that doesn't tell you anything by itself, right? Right. It's just a process by which you ask questions and conduct studies and test your hypotheses and whatever. So science doesn't really say anything itself. But when scientism happens is when people say, pretend as though there's something objectively true about what an expert says, for example.
Right. Or,
unquestionably true. to where it's almost as though maybe people put like a magical value on like putting the word science before something.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I think that's, yeah. Or if we're trying to base our life, or like we're just trying to follow what the experts say or what science, or science alone is not, I'm not sure if I'm saying it. Like, science alone doesn't give us the pathway for how we should live. Exactly. Should we live life?
Yeah.
But some people want to say that's the be all and end all. Mm-hmm. And then that leads to a lot of confusion.
Yeah. And I think the way, maybe I'll pose that to you. What do you feel like the way is that we can combat scientism versus science as an effective tool? And you want to come across good data and want to weed out the bad stuff. But yeah, how do we move away from scientism and claim what's good within science? That's kind of a broad question, but
yeah, that's a broad. And I'm not sure I have a good answer for that. I think to the extent that science can present us with data and facts and understanding about our natural world, but it can't tell us what to do with that, which I guess I'm sort of repeating myself. But I
mean, just recognizing that helps you.
I think so, yeah.
And being willing to do your own research, maybe, instead
to
of
do your own research, yeah. And to not think that's what the scientific community is trying to do. Like, the scientific community is not necessarily, trying to replace, to be the be all and end all of truth, to be the replacement for, our relationship with God, or, what philosophy and religion can give it, it's not, it's just.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I think it sometimes gets presented like that.
Yeah.
Which is why people can get like a certain skepticism towards science in general.
But there's plenty of very religious Christians within the scientific community. Yeah. And I know we're going to get into some of that too. And so the two are not naturally opposed to one another.
And that's super important to
right.
make clear.
Yeah.
Good. Well, let's jump into that question a little bit more then, of specifically within our community of the Anabaptists. Sometimes we have a certain skepticism, probably some of it for good reasons, some of it for somewhat naive reasons. So maybe let's talk about that. Why would that skepticism be there? And do you run into that some yourself?
I have been very blessed at our church and with everyone that I've interacted with. I don't think anyone's kind of been like, what in the world? Yeah. I have been told, well, maybe people are, I heard this, maybe people are more accepting because you didn't grow up Anabaptist, you see. So if you had grown up Anabaptist, they would really be raising eyebrows. But anyway, so I have not necessarily felt it personally, but obviously, I mean, you can see that there aren't a lot of Anabaptists in STEM fields, in science, technology, engineering, math. Yeah. So there's something going on where there's something that is pushing against that, or folks, our young people aren't naturally going to college to study these fields and to get careers in them. And I'm a little puzzled, but I have ideas for maybe perhaps why. And I'm interested in also, because you were raised more in that community, so what your thoughts are too.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, kind of as a side note here, but I think one of the cool things about having you on our program is that you're very much along the same lines as like the other Think Truth contributors. Basically, all of us, certainly on the podcast here, have, and most of the Think Truth staff are people who kind of grew up in this interesting space where our parents joined, or we joined the Anabaptists, and most of us have been there for 10, 15 years or more, but still it's, you do have kind of an outsider's perspective when you don't have cousins and family and grandfathers and whatever, all of that within the Anabaptist movement. So it's an interesting perspective, but.
So I guess I would say a few things. So I think there's maybe 3 things that I was thinking of. I know a couple of them you had come up with as well.
Yeah.
The skepticism towards higher education generally,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps the feeling that these fields aren't very practical. And as I was contemplating this too, I thought there's also something maybe a little bit deeper that's a good sort of caution, but is this thought that perhaps all of this scientific study and advancement is trying to take the place or rob some glory from God, or get into areas where that's really God's place and man is trying to. So I don't know which one you'd want to get into first, but
let's hit the one about higher education first, because I mean, in some ways that's the biggest one, right? Because if there is like a skepticism of college going to get a degree in this or that, that pretty much knocks out being involved with most research, because you kind of, I mean, you would know this more than I do, but you kind of have to have the necessary degrees in the necessary fields to contribute anything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and the reasons for that are complicated. Drew and I have talked about this some on the podcast already, but I think a part of it is just that it's somewhat threatening to the norm, because most Anabaptists have more practical occupations. So if you're, like myself, I'm a remodeler. I mean, I have a degree too, but my dad is a remodeler. I'm a remodeler. Most people I know are doing something practical, like with the trades or with farming or something like that. So if you have that environment, cultural environment where most people are involved in practical work, it's threatening because it has the potential to, like, you don't want to create people within your culture who are really good at something that no one else is, because then there's a sense in which they stand out, I guess, would be one. I think that's maybe a part of it.
Oh my. I hope that's not true, because I mean, somebody could be a master architect or builder, or I don't know, I hope that, I think God has given us different talents and gifts and things, and he's gifted each one of us in different and unique ways, and I hope that I would hope that we wouldn't be threatened by that uniqueness, but we would see it as the diversity of a body. So I
think probably it's not the biggest factor, but I know, like, within any culture that has a high degree of cultural conformity and uniformity, there just is that danger of, like,
you don't want to be different,
not wanting anyone to be different. But there's also the thing, I think, of just people who do have a degree in something sometimes are just kind of more stuck up and like, do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily for sure, but sometimes because they're really good they've had more education, and so there's a sense in which they're smarter than everyone or whatever, even though it's not necessarily
true. And I
think
we all go through this natural progression where as you start to learn something, all of a sudden you think, I know it all.
Yeah.
And then you get faced, like I did, where I was thrown into being a system engineer at a nuclear power plant. It was like, I do not know it all. Like, I don't know anything. Like, help, and so I mean, there can be some people in their maturity process who kind of get stuck for pride reasons, insecurity reasons, in wanting to think that they're better and know more. But I think that hopefully as we all continue to mature and grow holistically, like, you suddenly realize that humility, and I was going to say that later too, like, one of the important things in studying any of this stuff is to very quickly learn how to say, I don't know. Yeah. Can you help me? Like, that's great. That's key to being in any of these fields. Mm-hmm. So it could very well be true that folks may get stuck up, but I think that's a sanctification thing Christ is going to have to work on them with. For sure, yeah. A natural thing from getting a higher education degree. I think some of it, the fear of higher education too, is, are they going to learn things where suddenly they're not content with, our Anabaptist beliefs and practice where things get may get challenged. But I think we shouldn't, as churches, as communities, that's a spirit of control and fear that we should release. And we shouldn't, we're not serving one another if we're trying to hold each other back out of fear that we will lose you.
And this is something Drew and I say a lot. If we believe that our beliefs are ultimately defensible,
yes,
and we believe that the values we have are actually like really good stuff,
yes,
we're going to believe that they're going to hold up under scrutiny.
Yes.
And so we have to be willing to have those beliefs scrutinized.
Yes.
And that's not something that comes natural. It's hard to question one's own beliefs, and it's hard to see somebody else question them.
Yeah, or your children, or you're in the next generation. Yeah.
But if you really want to keep them, telling people you better not question them or else you're going to lose it is not the right strategy.
No, and so we just have to be secure in our relationship with Christ, secure in the truth of his word, secure in, where we've landed, and be all right with people going on their journey with God. And and so it's interesting because I was just having conversation with an Amish neighbor of mine about I won't get too off topic, but just the concept of they're not allowed to have prayer meetings and Bible studies, because that can start causing questions and challenging, and it's like, we have to just sort of release that spirit. So so let's not bring that kind of attitude towards higher education, and
that's good.
We don't have to be afraid. Yep. Also, maybe it's seen as not practical. So that was the second one. But I would like to say it's very engineering, a lot of things that you see around you that you all are using is the result of scientific study and discovery, and then engineering, putting it into practice. So to me, it's as like, if you think that you can learn the skills to build a building, well, why can't you learn the skills to build a bridge? Because that takes civil engineering. Or a nuclear reactor, which gives power, which gives our electricity. I mean, it's just harnessing. To me, it's the same thing. It's just a practical use of the resources God has given us to, help bring his, kingdom here. I don't know.
Absolutely.
So it is practical.
And another thing that comes, I think, into play here is the Apostle Paul's concept of whatever you do, do everything to the glory of God, which means that every practical thing you do or every scientific thing you do is under the umbrella or part of the great plan of showing God's glory and building his kingdom. Yeah. Because it's a real trap to think of only certain activities like sharing the gospel with your neighbor or whatever as this holy, like, good activities to the glory of God, and the other ones are like kind of on the next level or not quite as important. I know I've fallen into that trap a lot. But the more we realize every part of life is sanctified so long as we're doing it with thanks to God and as a glory to God, I think that's it's a paradigm that gives room to really care about science, right? Yeah.
And then, so this kind of goes into the last thing that I was thinking, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it, is that somehow as we've learned more about how the natural world works, some things maybe that previously maybe we would have attributed, how do I say? Maybe to God or not like just
the lightning example or
like, okay, now we understand the physical mechanisms behind lightning, and it's not but at the same time God is the creator. So I don't think that's totally it, because I think 500, 600, 700 years later we've kind of reconciled that concept that God is the ultimate creator, and that these natural laws are sort of how he is demonstrating. So they are a reflection of him. But I think
there's probably still some God of the gaps kind of thing going on.
There's and then I think also too, as technology has advanced, like medicine, like things like that, are we getting into areas where maybe that should be the domain of God. Sure. And I think I think science like right now has a lot of ethical
reality or something.
Yeah, a lot of ethical questions. I mean, you know, as we are developing medical technologies that are prolonging life, or are able to create life in cases where maybe couples couldn't have children, but now we have this reproductive technology, or I'm trying to think, like, or the study, you know, one of the fields that I'm in, you know, the study of nuclear physics and atomic theory kind of led to the development of nuclear weapons, you know, which are capable of massive destruction. And is that so? We're getting into the realm of artificial intelligence. What does that mean? Because God has created human. What does it mean to have an alternate form of, you know, cloning? So there's so many examples where the bounds of science sometimes seem to push. Some of this. We should like push into, is this? Yeah. And so I think we have to be discerning with that. And maybe there's some sort of healthy skepticism, or you know, is this really appropriate?
But it shouldn't keep us out from getting into science. I mean, we should be in those right? We should be deeply involved in the research and study and creation of new technologies, so that maybe we can help shape some of those things.
Right. And so I think that's the question. Would God prefer us to leave those spaces and let a more secular world kind of make those ultimate decisions and get into that? Or is his role of us, you know, as bringing his kingdom here and being, you know, the priesthood, you know, priests is our role more to be his, you know, to be a voice in the room for God's, you know, if that
I like
makes
that
sense.
Concept. And I think we're getting into kind of the last part of what we're saying here, which is, okay, so maybe it's a good thing for Anabaptists to get into science. Can we imagine what that would look like? How is this actually going to be something impactful in a positive way for our communities, both for Anabaptists, but also just our community around us in general, our country, our state, the state of technology, stuff like that. And I think that's a real part of it, is to imagine if we have something to offer, and I think we have a lot to offer. It's interesting you talk about our study ethic, you might call it, really impacting the way you thought. And that's beautiful. I think Anabaptists getting more education in general, getting into certain fields like the science, technology, et cetera, fields, enables us both in our Christian message and also in our specific, somewhat cultural and somewhat values driven, I guess, background, to be a voice in the room, to use your words, to be able to say, here's what we have to offer. Here's our view of life that's deeply influenced by scripture and our background and history and whatever. And here's our take on these things.
Yeah.
If we don't involve ourselves, we don't have that chance.
Right. And I think, you know, the scientific community is going to keep going. And I think that, as our society has become increasingly secular, and it's becoming, you know, and increasingly confused about ethics, about morality, because, you know, there's no absolute truth. We as Christians, I think we understand what absolute truth is in some of these matters. And we know that we're called to love others. We're called to love God. And if we come with that perspective into our research, into our practical applications, you know, in every scientific community, there's an ethics organization, or there's a, like for us, it's like a safety culture. So bringing an integrity to your work, because we're doing everything to the glory and honor of God, that's going to influence the actual work that happens, and others. You know, I think some of it's my personality, but yeah, in almost every job that I've had someone who's said to me, you know, your integrity really stands out. And I really appreciate that you stand for what you believe is right.
That's amazing.
You know, against, And I think that positively influences others. And so we really can make a difference. There's a need for it.
Yeah, maybe let's imagine some practical scenarios or some ways in which some of what we have to offer as Anabaptists might be seen as we get more into science and contributing to research and stuff. Something I thought of, curious to hear your thoughts as well, but something I thought of just as we were preparing for this podcast is in terms of medical research, a lot of Anabaptists are thinking more about holistic medicine and getting actual, I want to say cures. That's not really the right thing, but like trying to find answers that get to the root of problems rather than just having like drugs to sort of mask the symptoms. And I think that's a way in which a lot of people are seeing that modern medicine needs to be transformed because we're way too far. Even Europe is much better than the United States. The US is so much like, fix the symptoms and then like the underlying issues won't matter as long as you fix the symptoms with ever more drugs. This is one area in which, like, look, if you care about changing those things, and if you think the current state of medical research and technology and stuff is way too geared towards the pharmaceutical world instead of holistic stuff, get in there and help change it. We have a lot we can do if we involve ourselves in the scientific community. Yes. If you sit on the sidelines and don't contribute, you won't help to change it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think don't quote me on this, but I do read articles, about changes in like medical schools and like the courses they're offering, and they really are trying to think, teach doctors to care for the whole patient. Yeah. Because I think for so long doctors were like, okay, well, we just have to do the next treatment, and not kind of think about, for like the person's soul, where they, like holistically, okay, if we, we have a 10% chance of, like, do we just keep doing these extreme measures, or when are we bringing compassion and empathy into the medical work? So this is different than research, I know, but I was just kind of thinking as you were talking. So we can bring a deeper level of love and care for the person holistically versus just thinking the next drug, the next treatment. Yeah. Will just, and a lot of doctors struggle with how to talk about like end of life, how to have those conversations. And I think if we can come as Christians, as doctors, into those conversations and offer something more, I think that would be very impactful. Yeah. I think like kind of what we're talking with engineering, with technology. I mean, what if there were a whole bunch of Anabaptist Christians involved in Facebook and Instagram and the algorithm and kind of challenging the culture? I don't know, caring more for the user than the profit motive, if you will. Like, what does it gain a man if he, gains the whole world but loses his soul? So what does it matter if Instagram, you know what I'm saying? Like, but kind of applying that almost to technology and companies and our mission. Yeah. In that sort of way. In engineering, a lot of it is, like one of the things we talk about often is like the Challenger accident. And so there were some issues with so this is something that pretty much, I don't know, at least in our field, you're constantly taught about what went wrong there. And there were low-level engineers who had questions, the gaskets and that temperature they should not have done that space launch. And there was a lot going on. There was,
there were people on that, right?
Yeah.
That passed away.
So so the Challenger, it was like a space shuttle. And there were some questions about a particular component on this shuttle that in that particular temperature that they were planning for the launch, that it might catastrophically fail. And some people tried to bring it up, but overall the culture was like, just shut up. We got to go through with it, and it was not a healthy culture to raise concerns. And so it ended in devastation. The thing exploded, everybody died. And so there's instances like that. I mean, well, we just saw it with the airline, right? I mean, luckily nobody was hurt, but like in every one of these fields,
You're talking about the one with the door plug.
Yeah, the door plug. Yeah. Like there's places we should be bringing excellence to our work because, and in the field I do with nuclear, it's, low probability, but high consequence. So we're constantly like making a mistake has a really, and so if you can be a person of integrity and kind of bring that to your work, I think that, you can help prevent disasters. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I think there's a lot of room. Of course, there's a lot of room, whether it's in ethics or whether it's in our, the various things that we bring in of our culture with our work ethic or our, community first kind of view of the world. That's really powerful. I think to bring that up, I think one of the huge problems that we are dealing with right now especially in American culture is this breakdown of the local community, the neighborhood, right? Mm-hmm. Where 50 years ago, it was far more common for kids to be out playing baseball in the nearby field or playing basketball or whatever. And that still happens, of course, but it's a lot less common to know who your neighbors are, interact with them a lot than it used to be. Well, that's one. There's just another area in which, when it comes to the social sciences, if we were involved in that, we could be talking a whole lot more about the importance of community and helping to build community, and not just giving individualist answers to these problems of lack of social connection and stuff like that. Yeah. So just another example.
Yep, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else you want to add before we wrap up this conversation?
So I have a couple things that I was thinking I'd like to. So I think I talked a lot about this in my blog post that kind of accompanies this podcast, but just to inspire folks that are really excited about God and who God is, and want to learn more about him, that actually the study of science, the study of math can reveal so many interesting things about our Creator. I kind of talked in my blog post about, if you get into the study of time, the nature of time, suddenly things just kind of open up to you in the scriptures about what it means that God is omniscient or omnipresent, or can see is Alpha and Omega, beginning and end, and is somehow seeing it all. But it's well, if we kind of understand the nature of time as part of space, suddenly that starts to make sense. I'm not saying that we're going to fully comprehend God, because we can't, but God is the creator of all these things. And so they do reveal something about him. Or, as you get into higher level math and you start learning things about infinity, oh my, that just blows your conception of God. So actually studying these things can bring such reverence and awe and love of our Creator, rather than the opposite, which people kind of think, oh, it's going to push you away. And it does not have to do that. And it doesn't always do that. So I wanted to make that plug.
I appreciate that.
And then I also wanted to say, for anyone that's out there that's a young person or not a young person, but is kind of considering getting into these fields, but is sort of intimidated because maybe your high school curriculum, you only got up to trigonometry or algebra, whatever. So I will say that because of, you heard my long journey at the beginning, it was many years since I had taken a math class when I decided nuclear engineering. So I actually went to a local community college and took a pre-calculus class, and it was stuff that I had learned in high school, and that set me up for such success. So don't be afraid that, because I haven't had these courses in high school, and I had never taken physics in high school. Oh. But yeah. So it's not necessary. So, and I would actually encourage to starting at just your local community college, because
taking a few courses.
Yeah, because unfortunately your bigger schools, they like to call those classes the weeding out classes. So they're actually designing those classes to get you to drop engineering. So it's actually good to start in community college, where the professors are a lot more relatable. So I'll say that, and I also ended up being a math tutor at my university. again, to encourage you all, like, and the students who had like calculus in high school, they struggled the most. They were in the tutoring center, like, flunking Calc 3 because, I mean, to be honest, even if you had calculus in high school, it's different. It's different in college. You're going to get more out of it in college. So I would encourage you, like, don't be afraid that you're kind of a beginner and you don't have some of these basics. You can do it. And like I said, I mean, really, my 5th grade students at Shalom Mennonite School, like, I thought about them when I started these, and I just brought their same diligence. I thought about Faith Builders and just the way folks approached academics at Faith Builders. And I brought that same mindset into these, state schools, University of Tennessee, and it really served me. So do not be intimidated or concerned. If you're interested, go for it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, thanks again for being here. That's it.
Okay.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks.